Okay, there we go. All right, so that's paid. That's great, Susan. That was great work.
He did get it before Christmas, I believe, right? Just before?
Yes, yep, and he acknowledged that. He's got an automatic payment request system, so I had seen several of those, but I also informed him that we were trying to expedite the payment process. I guess consistent with what we've seen from Robert Hype. He understands the logistics that towns have to go through, so he wasn't too concerned. But when he did get it, he was very appreciative of the efforts we made to get him the money in an expedient manner. So do we want to discuss relative to that work done? Any subsequent follow-on work at Mount Jeff? And if so, we can maybe get talk about a little bit of the generalities of what we want to do, as well as potential of what that might cost. I'll open that up to the floor.
Well, Steph, you contacted Joyce, right?
Yep, that's correct. And she said the best person is that Mr. Kangas.
Right. And I had which we sort of knew. And I had a nice conversation with him. He was trying to be helpful. He did send me, he did send the digital picture, which is the same picture as up on Gates. It's the one that's on the sign. And he said, well, I have some stuff in the filing cabinet at the town hall or the library. And he was trying to be helpful. But I think we may have to end up doing a lot of research ourselves somehow.
What did you actually ask him?
I asked him if he could lay his hands on any specific pictures or articles about the place. And he kept on talking to him about blueberry picking up there, which to me was news. But hey, he's a townie. And then, like I said, he sent me the picture that we already know about. But I can send it to everybody. And if you needed it for any reason or wanted to keep it in the folder, it would be yours. But that's the only thing he's come up with so far.
At first, he wasn't sure what property we were even talking about, correct?
Yeah, he was a little bit. Finally, I said, well, why don't you take a drive up there and see what we've done? And he's battling cancer, so he's got other priorities. I get it. And he was just delighted that anybody was interested in history. So I just said over and over that, at his leisure, if he could just keep it in the back of his mind, and I'd probably bug him again when the weather was better and we could go up and look at the place. He'd probably be thrilled to do that. He's very pleasant and a little eccentric, but that makes him charming.
Well,
but we don't know any more than we did.
Isn't one of the things we want to get from the Historic Commission also, in addition to any information about the history of the place, is what they would input on how we should approach doing any other work up there?
Yeah, I mean that's what that's the line of conversation I was hoping to start with them, to see if they have any opinions on what should or should not be done at the site.
That's why I was hoping for pictures, because I'm not sure he's really thought about it. But perhaps I can approach him later when the weather gets better, and we could have a little mini field trip and then get him to be more specific.
Based upon what I hear, and along the lines of Mark's comment and Rick's, that was one of the, if not the main gist of reaching out to the historical committees, society, whatever they are, of a little guidance on the work that we definitely want to engage in as we move forward up there. I mean, just relative to the foundation, the old concrete, et cetera, some of the things that probably could and should be taken out of there, but it would be good to have input from them. This is a question for Steph now. You contacted Joyce as since she's an active member of the Historical Society, right?
Yeah, and she said that all those questions should go towards the Historical Commission. Is that right? Is that the
Yep.
difference? One's a society, one's a commission.
Right. One's more formal and appointed, and one is
Oops.
more social.
Holy mackerel.
What
I
happened?
think can you guys hear us?
Yeah, we can see you too.
I could have just moved over.
Oh, no, I'm not even sure what I did. I just moved that. That shouldn't have. I wonder if I just lost the computer.
So what about
I
if we
should- just
tentatively
anything
have
on
the
the
field trip
display
in
should not
spring?
have
Oh, he's fine.
interfered with that.
And now for a brief advertising interlude.
Brought to you by.
She has no clue what we're talking about. We were reading the Berkshire Hills logo on your sweatshirt, Steph.
I wonder if it disturbed the power to the display.
We can still see them and hear them.
I'm thinking he can't hear us. Bob, can you hear us? Yeah, that's the problem. We can see him. His computer's working.
I think they lost their display and their speakers.
Well, we can see him. Yeah, so can somebody text him and let him know that we can at least see him, so we still got a connection?
There's only a couple connections here.
We can hear him and see him.
Oh, he can't hear us.
That's right. And apparently he can't see us. It could be as simple as him clicking a couple buttons.
The display is back.
There
Okay.
you go. Well,
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
We didn't lose you, Bob. We could always hear and see you, but you couldn't hear or see
Oh,
us.
it's a good thing I didn't comment as what I was thinking about. But
so I think his question to me was what I asked Joyce, and my question to Joyce was pretty vague, just sort of, we want to do we've done some work up there. We want to continue with work. What do you guys think? And she suggested that I speak with Mr. Kangas.
but
My suggestion would be that we, as a committee, send a formal letter to them and tell them what we're looking for in the way of information, send it to all of them. I don't know when their next meeting is, even if they have one scheduled in the near future, but we've got all winter to get some feedback from them, but then specifically state what we're really interested in.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea, Rick.
Yeah.
I agree. Rick, you want to take a shot at drafting that?
Yep, we'll do.
Your idea.
No, that's the right idea, and I have something along.
No, that's fine. That's easy.
Yeah, and I have something along the same lines relative to the fund replenishment that we're going to talk about later. So do we want to postpone further discussion until we get some feedback from them?
Yeah, I guess I think that at our last meeting, we talked about the various things that we wanted to look into. I don't know that any of them are particularly urgent at this time to come up with some decisions,
No.
relating to other things besides historic values. Things
Yeah,
like,
and maybe the best way to conclude your note to them, Rick, would be maybe to suggest a joint visit up there. If we can see things and see
Oh,
the
yeah, sure.
and see the decayed concrete that, to me, wouldn't provide any insight on a historical aspect, but that'd be up to them to decide. I mean, my opinion is the concrete rubble should get removed and things neatened up there as much as possible to facilitate the maintenance. And then obviously to my perspective, there's some really significant stone aspects to the foundation there. So preserve all of that stuff. But at any rate, so that's the kind of things we'd like to go over them, but that'd be much easier to discuss with a in-person visit. So,
Sure. All right, I'll include that. I think we also talked last time about getting some input from DPW as well, since they do the mowing up there and
Yeah, well, that's really only once we get to the point of logistics of actually trying to do something.
yep. After we agree with per Mark's comment, after we agree or get to some sort of concurrence with this historical society, if that's their name again, then that would say, okay, let's do this, this, and this, and then get the DPW up there. All right.
Okay.
Enough discussion on that. Good. I have met, one of my action items was to meet with Lance, which I did do. I happened to be going by there, and he was out in front of his barn area, so I walked up and talked to him. The part of the issue with Lance, he's still very active in interest. Lance, I guess, for lack of better vernacular, Lance is a hayseed kind of guy. He's a farmer. He's still excited about doing work up there. He acknowledged that some of the stuff that he had done was later than what he wanted to do, relative to being able to get a first cut in earlier on all the fields which can be cut at any time. And that would have facilitated getting a second cut in, or at least more of a second cut. They're still resolving some family issues as a result of the passing of Paul Lane, his father, relative to access to some of the equipment, etc. But I did get a good sense that he's going to do a better job next year. So that's sort of the best way I can describe that conversation.
So I have a quick question. Were there any hay deposits in 2020?
Those should have been, he was already in the process. He did comment that he's taking care of that and was taking care of that at that point in time with Ryan and the
Kelly?
Kelly, yeah.
So
I don't know if it's been processed or not. That'd be a question for Ryan, or I can get back to Lance. But he at that instant when I talked to him, he said he had, I think, just taken care of that, or was in communication with Ryan/Kelly to get that straightened out.
So that was the end of the year somewhere?
No,
That would have been
back in November.
That would have been about a good 4 weeks ago.
Okay.
It was shortly after our last meeting.
Well, Susan's got a request into Ryan to see if he can dig up that information for her.
Okay.
I've been digging though for a couple months, so I'm gonna keep on digging, I guess.
All right.
All right.
And then I know Mark had to have a little bit of discussion on revisiting the hay contract. So this may not be a bad time to do that, because we're about to head into new business at this point in time anyway. So Mark, you want to make some comments on that?
Hay contract or hay management plan?
Hay management plan.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, going forward for types of work that we've sort of slung ideas around with for Mount Jeff and surrounds. Some of it is it's a little bit of a gray area in terms of the restriction that's on the property.
Okay. Restriction relative to what?
The watershed restriction on the Mount Jeff property itself. We haven't talked about it tonight, but we're talking about, trying to do more invasive control along the field edges and in that lot across the street from the picnic area. That lot across the street is actually excluded from the watershed restriction. But certainly all the hayfields are part of the restriction. And when we sent the forest mulching machine up along the edge of Gates Hill Field there,
Okay,
which helped clean things out. But in the long run, we're really not going to make much progress against the
invasives.
the bittersweet and the multiflora without some kind of chemical control as well. I mean, you can do it by repeated mowings, but Lance's record hasn't been very good on mowing, and ours hasn't been a whole lot better, frankly. So I don't think we can rely on mowing strictly if we're really trying to make some progress against the invasives. So with respect to the restriction, one of the problems is that the restriction says you can't use herbicides and pesticides
Whoa.
except for as specified in the hay management plan.
Aha.
And the current hay management plan says, yeah, you can't use pesticides and herbicides. But we had talked about doing an update to the hay management plan anyway a couple of years ago, just because some of the parts of it are, a little funky at this point, referring to testing labs that may or may not exist, and, some other stuff.
Isn't it the only hay management plan, right? It's never been modified?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the original one.
So that's 2002, right? That's how Jeff was acquired.
Yeah, I believe you. I can't remember right now. Something like
Come on, Mark, come on.
Somewhere in that vintage.
Anyway, so if we went ahead with an update to the hay management plan, what I was thinking of was that we would establish a dialogue with the WPR coordinator, the person at Water Supply that handles the restriction, and say, our existing hay management plan says that we want to control vegetation along the field edges, clean it back to the stone walls. In order to do that effectively, we're thinking about having our new hay management plan refer to highly selective herbicide application.
Okay,
Not willy-nilly broadcast spraying, but targeted application like we did at Malone this fall. And see if water supplies. I mean, water supply. The way the restriction is written, water supply has to review the hay management plan anyway.
Oh, okay.
Do they have to approve it or just review it?
Yeah, well, I'd have to look at it again to be sure, but I think the implication is that they have to approve it.
Yeah, if they're reviewing it, they must.
So anyway, I was thinking of opening up some lines of communication, seeing if they might be receptive to an update that included something like that. And then if we were successful in driving that through, then it would open up a whole new world in terms of how we want to address the edges of those fields, and what we could apply for money for to address the edges of those fields. Because we've talked on and off over the last year or two about one of the habitat management grants. And I talked briefly about it with a what the hell are they? they deal with invasive vegetation plans and stuff like that. And they were of the opinion at that point that Fish and Game might be receptive to clearing invasives out of the fields that they currently stock with pheasants. It would certainly make life easier for hunters if they could actually walk through that lot across the street without beating their way through the bushes, as it were.
Not good news for the pheasants though, huh? But anyway, that's okay.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the point of stalking, I guess.
So are you saying you're going to take that as an action, Mark, to try to start a conversation with somebody?
Yeah, well, let's expand the discussion. Well, yeah, I mean, I will.
Who is it that you have to approach for that?
He's not sure exactly.
Well, no, actually, I do know.
I mean, what department or whatever, not necessarily.
It's water supply at DCR. They're the holders of the restriction.
Oh, okay.
And actually, I just had emails back and forth with the woman that has that role today. So she actually I have before as well, but now I'm on her radar screen. I mentioned that we might be thinking about doing updates to the management plans this year, and that I'd be interested. If we do decide to do that, then I might get back to her to have further conversations. So that's one management plan. That's the hay management plan, and the benefit would primarily be potentially getting approval for herbicide applications and setting up the potential for application for a habitat management grant to do that.
Is that a large financial, I mean, relatively, is that a big project financially? And
Well, yeah, I mean, more than we have comfortably.
yeah, because I
at $1,500 a day for the mulching machine,
right. Even-
plus if you have to hire a professional to develop the plan to do it all.
And the materials themselves then, right?
Yeah, I mean, materials aren't
Not that-
outrageous, but
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. To do a decent job across the street and along the hayfield edges is probably a 10K plus.
Yeah,
Project.
that would have been my guess, yeah.
Probably have to hire a licensed person to apply it too, right?
That would have been along the lines of our
Maybe.
Robert Hype's friend there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Mark and I and Steph and I did a tour of an unrelated thing, but it's related only, and it's had to do with trail work for some folks that are trying to do things at the property in Concord related to Henry David Thoreau type stuff. But there are some massive invasives over there, and Robert Hype, not by accident, a lot of the things he does are associated or have invasives creeping in probably at least half the jobs that he does. And so he's got a contact, and this person was, Mark can comment too, but the person that he brought on that trip was he's from Connecticut, but he was a very educated person on invasives, et cetera, and the control thereof.
So let's hold that thought on the hay management plan, and let me expand the conversation now to the forest management plan as well. Again, the existing forest management plan for the property is the original one. It's never been updated. Technically, you're supposed to update them every 10 years. So we're overdue on an update from that standpoint anyway. There probably is grant money available for these plans. Have to be prepared by a licensed forester, and for a property that's covered by a watershed restriction, there is grant money available to do the update on the management plan. And these management plans can also have a component of them where you look at bird habitat on the forest and how you might want to manage for birds, or whatever your goals are for that forest property. But relevant to what we've been discussing recently, specifically Jassie's Meadow, there's also a kind of there's a potential restriction issue with respect to that, in that the restriction has a provision saying that if part of the property has come up in early successional growth, you're not allowed to revert it back to a field. So if we wanted to bring the forest mulcher through that 1.5 acre section there, it's kind of it's an open question at this point of whether that would be allowable. But if it was part of our forest management plan, and say part of our rationale for wanting to clear that area is that it might, that it's wildlife related, that we want to open it up into a glade as a woodcock singing ground, or name your other wildlife that enjoys open areas in the forest.
Woodcocks thing?
They do.
They do.
Steph and I, in another roundabout fashion, apparently during mating season, they have a pretty elaborate courtship. We were actually had to do with solar. There was a farm up in Warwick, a small farm in Warwick, and that has the kind of solar panels we were initially interested in. And the people there invited us to go up because it was sometime in early spring, and it was I guess it's elaborate enough to warrant watching. So I mean, I know Mark it sounds like he knows about that. So
While they're on the ground, they make sort of a beeping noise.
Yeah, well, they go spiraling up into the sky at dusk.
yeah.
Pretty
But
dramatic.
I know we've got a bunch of woodcocks over at Malone.
Yeah,
I don't spend enough time over at Mount Jeff to know if they're over there as well.
yeah, they're at Mount Jeff too.
Yeah, I've seen a few over this way too. So they're pretty. You don't normally see those rascals, but they're around. So
Well, Mark, speaking of Malone, our forestry plan for Malone, is that something that we should also be looking at? And would it be a separate project, or?
That's probably a good question. I think we would try and rope it into the same. I don't know. We'd have to think about it more. It wouldn't be. Actually,
I mean, it's contiguous.
maybe it would be I don't know whether it would be a separate plan or expand the scope of the Mount Jeff plan.
Get a volume discount from the forester.
From a grant dollars standpoint, it wouldn't be eligible for grant dollars because it's not a state-held conservation restriction there. Or, well, I take that back. If we kept it independent, a new plan is eligible for grant dollars. It's just when you do a renewal that's not normally eligible for grant dollars, except if it's covered by a state restriction. So yeah, interesting question. We can think about that some more.
okay, so do we have some sort of a proposal, Mark, relative to what you'd carrying this forward?
Yeah, I mean, so what's your level of interest, Todd?
I'm really not sure what I can do for this. But
It's a pretty straightforward process. It's just going to involve some email communications with the guy that administers the grants,
Mhm.
and with a forester who the forester who did the original plan lives in Hubbardston here. Jassy recommends him. I don't know him personally.
Hmm.
However, the other interesting aspect of it is that I think he runs a firewood operation. I mean, his website is out of date, but his website indicates that they run firewood. And as part of developing the plan, we might be able to interest him in taking down all the substantial wood along the hayfield margins for firewood for free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, the actual grant application process is pretty much a nothing. There's just some associated communications that would have to happen with the DCR department that administers it, and with the forester, and get a quote, and, that kind of stuff.
What kind of timeline are we talking about here? Weeks, months, days?
Days.
Tomorrow.
What are you doing this week, Todd?
Month or months.
Oh, okay. That's not bad. We have to talk. But
I just, if there isn't any other avenue, then yes, I'll do it. But I haven't heard yet whether I have the boundary marking contract for Fish and Game this spring. If I do, then I'm going into my busy season here.
yeah.
All right, well, let's, go ahead, Todd.
Let's get together and talk about it.
I'll send you some links and my impression of how the process would go,
Sure.
and then we can talk some more.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what these, the grant application is like on this, Mark. I know I did, Steph and I worked on a Mass Trails grant last year, and the deadline was February 1st at midnight or something, a very specific deadline.
Yeah.
Is there something like that on what you're talking about?
No, there's no deadline. It's a rolling application throughout the year. It's just a matter of whether all the money that's available has been spoken for yet or not.
Yeah.
Okay. And then if not, then you just put it in for the following year or something. So,
Yeah.
Sure.
And then the context of that, what you're talking about, Mark, was that what Todd would be working on would be what the forest management
Or
plan
the
update?
precedent plan, yeah.
What about the hay management plan?
I'll take that if people are agreed that it sounds like a good idea to pursue something like that.
Yeah, is that something that is supposed to be updated on a regular basis too?
The restriction says that it will be updated and reviewed by DCR every 3 years.
Oh, really?
And they've done that, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right.
We've only missed 5 cycles at this point.
Okay, so we can, all of this sounds good because it would be really nice to get some control over those growth. And I know what just was done with Robert in a relatively short amount of time, granted along the lines what Mark talked about. If you don't follow it up with something, it's just going to go back maybe with a vengeance. So it would be nice to get those fields. What we did at Mount Jeff, you could just, as you approach the stone walls, there's big trees back in there and nice stone walls. It'd be nice to at least get that whole situation under control. So both of those efforts are well worth pursuing. So we'll leave that, the hay management plan tentatively in the hands of Mark. And then the forest management plan will be tentatively, Todd, based upon conversation between he and Mark. How's that sound?
Is that a definite maybe?
That's a definite maybe. That amounts to a definite maybe.
Be a possible maybe.
All right. Move on to new business. Let's talk about want to talk about your grant, Mark? Which is great, by the way.
Yeah, actually, it was a big day in Grantland.
Yeah, I saw a lot of traffic today.
There was a lot of traffic today. All the remaining pieces of the grant application fell into place today. We now have approvals from DCR, from Ryan at the town, from Water Supply, and from North County. All of which needed to indicate in writing their support of this application, and they all rolled in today.
Oh, that's great.
So it's ready to go at this point. I'll probably upload it at some point later this week.
Okay, and that's a Mass Trails grant, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one of these February 1st deadline things. So
It is.
looks like you're in pretty good shape on that.
Yeah, I was. I think I indicated my concern last time, in that I had just found out that allegedly we were going to have to submit a new trail proposal to DCR and have it routed around for 90 zillion different approval.
Yeah.
But since then, they decided that no, we don't actually need that. So great. That went away.
The rough order of magnitude on that was somewhere in the 7 to 8K range.
Yeah, it's about an $8,000 grant that we're applying for.
Okay, now, excuse my delinquency, but I know that's a matching contribution type of thing. So and I haven't looked at the financial aspect of what
the match is all in labor.
Okay.
Labor provided by DCR and labor provided by us.
What's the labor by DCR? Again, excuse my ignorance, but
Two laborers assigned from Dunn State Park for a week next fall.
okay, and then that's to what, help install?
Plant signposts.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yep.
Yeah, installation.
Okay, and so you've got through the forester that you've got contact to get them to contribute that?
That's from Tim Culkeen.
Yeah.
State Park, and Denise Morrissey has been all over it, as well as the complex.
So you already have the agreements from those people to contribute the later that will help for the matching portion of the grant.
Got it in hand, in writing.
Absolutely. All right, that's fantastic.
We're not responsible for materials at this point on that. I thought that was 460, remember? And I said, oh, right? Is that one?
I changed it around a little bit.
Okay. So
we're now those material costs are now part of the grant ask.
Oh, very nice. Because we've been spending money, and until we make some, we need to.
Yeah, and all the support from Ryan was great on that. The one question that he had, which I don't know what you can add from a clarification viewpoint, was on labor and expenses that you're going to encounter in the process. Is that in a good state as you see it?
Yeah, it's fine for now. We'll work it out if we actually get the grant. It's stuff that we would buy at Home Depot.
That was in the order of magnitude of $1,000 for.
Yeah, it's about $1,000 stuff that we would buy at Home Depot or at Mackey Lumber or whatever.
Yeah.
And the town doesn't have accounts with either of those. I was figuring the easiest was going to be to just buy it and get reimbursed the way we normally do.
Yeah.
We'll work that out with Ryan at the time. It's not a stumbling block at this point.
All right.
But what changed between the last time we talked about it and now in terms of who's paying for the material costs is basically I donated my labor for the graphic design and for the project management,
Okay.
which I was going to try and get paid for it before, until I realized that was just going to be a whole hornet's nest because of conflict of interest type issues with
Yeah.
contracts.
We'll buy you lunch.
It was not going to be worth it. So I donated my labor, and that covered more of the match that was going to be material costs.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Any more comments or discussion on the grant?
No, it'll go in this month. I'm pretty optimistic. I mean,
it was a pretty, Steph and I put in quite a bit of work trying to get this thing associated with North Quabbin, which was in crew terms a bit of a fiasco, but it was a learning curve. And I talked to Amanda Lewis, and I followed up this year with Amanda Lewis to get some feedback on that. And so it was a learning curve for us going through it. But projects of the order of magnitude of what you're talking about would be, based upon the conversation I had with her, would be much looked on much more favorably than what we attempted to do. And we were both green at that. I don't want to even go into that any further than that. It was
honestly, I'll be pretty shocked if we do not get this grant.
No, this sounds good. It's the order of magnitude where they have funds that they can support quite readily. So yeah, it sounds great. So that's all great. Really good stuff. Thank you, Mark.
Yes. Thanks.
Any feedback on the Eagle Scout help?
Yeah, I met with Logan. We did a walk around Malone Road, and I explained, we basically talked about what level of stuff we were trying to clear from the trails and what would get left. And he went back to his scoutmaster, and the scoutmaster, well, let me back up a little bit. You had sent communications back to him, Bob.
Yep.
Suggesting some other projects that he might be interested in, which were much more substantial projects.
Yep.
I don't remember whether it was.
Well, there was some species marking and cellar hole identification, those kind of things.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
And anyway, they would have been much more substantial. What he needs at this point is he needs the community service hours with a conservation orientation for his Life Scout rank, which is 6 hours.
Yeah. You couldn't even start some of those other things with 6 hours.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so running around and picking up sticks on the trails is much more in line with what he needs.
To put it bluntly. Okay.
But anyway, he went back to his scoutmaster. The scoutmaster would like to take this opportunity to involve a substantial portion of the troop and run around as a group and do this as a group. They were originally thinking about going out there yesterday, but then postponed it at the last minute for I'm not sure why. It's a needless to say, it's a little bit of herding cats if you try and schedules with a bunch of kids, and they need to have two adult supervisors out there, one to supervise the kids, and one to supervise the other adult and make sure they're not going to get sued for bad behavior.
I get that one. The,
And to the extent that that this cleanup work requires chainsaw work,
Yeah.
we're constrained by our agreement with DCR that you're really supposed to be trained for chainsaw work.
mhm.
So I'm going to go out whenever it happens. I'm going to go out with them, and I'm going to be the chainsaw operator,
Mhm.
Okay.
and they'll do the dragging and lopping and
Is it more of a pain in the ass than it's worth?
yeah, but
It sounds like it's getting close to that.
yeah, but you know, it's a nice. Well, there's two aspects to it. One, it's nice to be able to offer him these hours, which are kind of hard to come by, conservation hours during the winter.
Yep.
But the other thing is that, you know, we have an interest in establishing a relationship with the scout.
Yeah.
Because this is a continuing pipeline
Yep.
of potential projects that they can help with. So, yeah, it's worth it. And even if it's not worth it for this particular task, it's worth it.
Yep. Maintain the connection. All right, that sounds good. I've been out only in a small portion of them recently. On the way back from Mount Jeff with the tractor, I just noted on Old Cross, there was one good sized tree down. And then
Yeah,
on the trail that didn't block the trail, I got by it without having to do anything. But
there's actually another one down that is blocking the trail now.
is there what on the Old Cross?
Yeah, one on Old Cross and one on Mill Pond.
Okay.
But I know the one you're talking about as well. It could use.
Yeah, I kind of angled across the trail. It was a good sized tree. I think
Yeah.
maybe probably a half hour, 45 minutes to clean it up or something like that. So, okay. And then there was one I think it's on our trail system, the one that goes up to Sawyer's Field. And that one I did take care of on the way back. Otherwise, I wouldn't have got home. So, let's see, replenishing the rider account. I have just about completed, and I was working on that today, a note and to, let's see, I'll just talk to it. I'm generating a note to both Pax and Rec and the town administrator that basically summarizes the situation that we face, that we have the three accounts that we have talked about. And one of them gets quite a bit of replenishment on a yearly basis. That's the Hubbardson Preservation Fund that is now one account that monies get updated or contributed to each year via the Hay contract. And my request to Ryan and Janda is to get a non-binding agreement that we should be able to use our rider account to pay, be able to make expeditious payments for things just like what we have done, but then to be able to replenish the rider account via money from the Hubbardson Preservation Fund, because that's the one that grows, or at least has monies contributed to it, relatively significant monies, somewhere as a minimum in the $2,000 range to maybe up to as much as $5,000 a year on a yearly basis. I will send that around to our committee first, and then I'm going to submit that to Parks and Rec, hence Sanda, for their input. And that was, I guess, how I thought I was going to approach that. Is that in line with what everybody else thought? And that's just about done. I should be able to send that out tomorrow to everybody to take a look at it. And if everybody else is in line with that, then I will submit it to Parks and Rec, Sanda, as well as Ryan. I wanted to get Ryan on board with that because it involves manipulation of accounts that are in the town record.
So your end game is ease of payment, right?
Is the end game, the rationale for it is to be able to, yes, have access, is to utilize monies that we have accessible to us that we don't want to just deplete, because that doesn't grow. If we deplete the rider fund, and that's a nice level of funding, roughly 6K or whatever it was at, roughly 6K. So that would cover a majority of the relatively small things we take on, like what we just did at Mount Jeff. But we don't want to continually deplete that. And so we would like a memorandum of understanding, maybe based on, we need some sort of concurrence. And this is maybe where I could take some input right now. It can't be a blank check. So even if it's a relatively small amount of money, say 2K, it can't be a relatively small, a blank check to say, yeah, we're definitely going to approve a refund of 2K that we could put back into the rider account. So the logistics of it, I think, would have to go along the lines, which is not exactly what we did here. Do something a little bit more proactive or a little bit earlier in time. We could have sent something to Parks and Rec back in October, say, that say, we want to do some work at Mount Jeff. We have estimates that this will be roughly a $1,500 to $2,000 range. Do you anticipate that we would request that you be able to, we're going to fund this out of the rider account with hopes that we could get replenishment of the rider account from the Hubbardson Preservation Fund. Something along those lines. Is that line up with what people think how this should go?
Well, let me make
it's an awkward thing to phrase how we want to.
It makes double transactions from what I can see, unless the rider account is something that's set up with Venmo or something like that, if somebody wants to be responsible for it.
Well, when you process the payment out of the rider account, didn't you have direct control over that?
No, I have to fill out the forms from Kelly and get signatures from you. In a way, it protects whoever's doing that, though, because you have no immediate access. So
could you have taken the money out of the Hubbardson Preservation Fund in exactly the same time frame?
No, it would have taken longer because we have to wait for the Parks and Rec.
Well, that's my point. So
but they did it in a very timely manner this time. I mean, so she actually did come through. So your end game is you want it to be quicker and independent.
Well, yeah, not to have to wait potentially maybe up to 6 weeks to get the money.
I think it sounds confusing, and I think it might be misunderstood. Does anybody else have any input? Like, I'm Sanda, and I'm the one that has to give the okay, and now I don't know. I mean,
if we're going to request in advance the possibility of a $1,500, $2,000, whatever expenditure, that we'd like to take the money out of the rider fund that they could then reimburse. If we are asking for it in advance, they can actually approve it at their next meeting, which hopefully they meet monthly, right?
Well, I don't know.
No, not necessarily, not that crew.
Parks and Rec? We're not talking CPC, they never meet, but,
That's another thing.
I mean, I don't know, I guess if we have to go and inform them ahead of time anyway,
Yeah.
you know, why not just get approval at that point in time to spend the money?
Because otherwise it's two transactions from one account to the other and then to whomever it's going to. Instead of just, okay, it's going for this invoice.
Well,
But-
one of the transactions is just for Kelly to move funds from one account to another. That's not really a transaction. You know, that's
Mark,
just-
you got some comments, Mark?
Well, I'm pondering.
So,
Yeah, I guess I'm leaning towards the scenario that Rick just painted. Is that if we know we're going to be incurring an expense, why not just approach Parks ahead of time before we actually have the invoice in hand and say we want your approval and it's going to be approximately X. We would like your conceptual approval at this point, and when the invoice comes in, we're going to submit it to Sanda for immediate payment out of covered preservation.
That's not what Bob wants to
Yeah,
do.
I understand that, and I agree with that, which would mean that I don't want to throw some confusing letter up in front of them along the lines of what I started to generate. So that means I won't do that. We'll just use our existing protocols that are available to us to pursue it. Is that what I hear?
Yes.
Just-
I'm the only one that said yes.
Yes,
Just accelerating the timeline a little bit, trying to be a little more proactive as to when we approach
Okay.
Parks and Rec for.
yeah, and I think,
Okay,
I
so-
think we have the ability to push them a little bit.
Okay,
Um,
so like in the case that we've done, we've already gone down a particular path and we've used money out of the rider account. Should we make any attempt to replenish that?
Yes. But how? Right.
Well, you mean through the vehicle
No.
we just.
Well, no, not quite. It would be a different vein. Like I was trying to make a more procedural type thing where we could do the same thing in the future and get some sort of a concurrent or an agreement that say, yeah, that's an okay process. And that is a little bit difficult to phrase. In this case, I'd be just requesting something for this one instance. But in the future, we would normally try to go down the path of trying to get money out of the Hubbardson Preservation Fund with a preliminary agreement from Parks and Rec. Like in this particular case, if I use this particular case as an example, we could have gone to Parks and Rec earlier, and we did have some idea that we wanted to do something like this. So I could have generated something and got a preliminary estimate from Robert Height and says, okay, we're going to do a day's worth of work. This will be estimated at $1,500, whatever it turned out to be. And ask for what, tentative approval? Is that what I would have asked for?
Sure.
And so I asked for,
Well,
go ahead, Mark.
I mean, you don't want to submit it to them twice for approval.
Right.
You would be looking for approval from what do they have, a committee?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whatever
I
it
think
is.
it's around 5 people.
Okay, but
You would be looking for the vote ahead of time
okay,
based
But
on
based on what? Approval of what?
of an estimate.
Of an estimate.
Would
then
you
don't
want
you
to
have to go
approve an
back
estimate?
for-
I wouldn't.
Yeah. you can
Don't
do
you have to go back for approval of the invoice?
Yeah, then that's double the work. That's,
Well, wait a minute. Do you?
yeah,
You have to,
that's exact.
you're going to need a voted approval for the exact amount.
And you need signatures.
Or maybe,
Okay, well, scratch that then. That doesn't buy us anything. Going in.
Bob, I get what you're saying. We should be in the 20, we need to, the town needs to come up with a more timely way of paying, but until they do it as a group, I think we do it the old fashioned. I mean, I don't know.
Well, let's talk about the payment.
Like Hike,
Yeah, so
that didn't take that long.
when you're in business, and I ran a business for a few years,
30 days.
it's not unusual for any supplier to get paid in, it's in 30 days. And, and I think we should be able to get the town to pay in 30 days of an pre-approved invoice. And
Not if you
I don't think.
a Parks and Rec meeting within that 30-day period.
Right. We were just lucky this time that she,
Well, no, if
meant
we,
the
if
next-
we go to them with a quote and say, will you approve this expenditure, right? Then it gets voted on, and then when it comes through, we just get the signatures and it goes to the accountant.
No, but what if the amount differs from that original
Yeah,
estimate?
yeah, which it probably will. I mean, an estimate is just that.
Yeah.
Also, keep in mind, if we want to replenish Ryder, it has to be used just for Mount Jeff, right?
yeah, but
I'll
this
keep that
this
as
this
a timeline.
replenishment, yeah, but the replenishment scenario, we're talking about two different things. We're
Right.
talking about what we want to do in the future versus what we want to do right at this instant, potentially relative to a replenishment. So let's get rid of the replenishment business and just talk about what we want to do in the future. What I see taking place here or happening is if we go to Parks and Rec with an estimate, they would probably need a meeting to say, yeah, we approve an estimate of 1,500, 2,000, whatever it might be. But then they have to have another meeting to approve the invoice, I think, right?
That's what we had to do, remember? He set an estimate and then the bill came in lower, which works nicely, but it doesn't always happen that way,
Well,
right?
let's
Well,
take this.
the estimate was no formal estimate. It was something he verbalized, and so
Todd
we-
approved up to 2,500,
yeah.
remember?
And
Todd?
his
Our
first
committee.
Yeah,
his first verbal thing to me was $1,700 a day, and then I had an inclination that it would be lower because of an email that I got from him, based upon continuing conversation with them as a result of the stuff we did over at Concord. And so he sent an email that said, yeah, I think probably more like $1,500 a day, which I think is what it turned out to be. But again, it was nothing that I received in print. It was no written estimate. I just need some guidance on how we're going to approach Parks and Rec for an ongoing process, as well as potentially for a replenishment.
replenishment to where?
Well, never mind replenishment. Forget that. I don't want to talk about that. Let's just talk about for going forward, how we want to work with Parks and Rec. Do we want to have confidence? We're just trying to get a feeling of confidence that they're going to pay an approximate amount of money.
So if we use this as an example again,
Yeah,
I mean, we
it's a perfect example. So because
Yeah.
it's the same scope that would be going to in the future. So
So So in this particular case, we ran the risk of, we approved spending the money for hiring Hype,
Yep,
but we didn't have approval that we could have sent that invoice to Parks and Rec and they could have voted that they weren't going to reimburse it too. Right?
yep.
So that's what we're trying to avoid.
But it must have been set up that way for a reason. I don't like the Mother May I either, because it's our hay money, it's Mount Jeff hay money. But it was set up this way for what reason? What could it be? So that there's more input in spending it?
Maybe, Bob, the first step would be to have a informal conversation with Ryan to discuss our problem. Because, if we're required to use the current process, we can't make plans to do anything, and we need to get pre-approval anyway. Then
That's true too.
Let me paint a slightly different scenario. Still probably better broached as a conversation than as a formal letter, at least initially. But for the reasons that Rick just gave of being able to have money that we knew was under our control versus money that
May or may not.
may or may not be under our
Right. Oh.
right now we're constrained on where the hay money gets deposited by statute.
There,
That's the way they set up this statute, was that revenues coming from town conservation lands were going to go into this Hubbardston Preservation Fund
trust.
for uses for either recreation or open space. So we can't change that.
No, and that's all fine. We just make that one clarification though. It goes in there for open space or recreation, but the Parks and Rec are the people that say yes or no on that. So
Yes.
it goes in for both, but they have the yes or no.
Yes.
We don't have the yes or no.
but
Yes.
that's by statute.
Let me paint this other scenario. What if you propose that going forward, any hay contract money deposits get transferred from the Hubbardston Preservation Fund into the open space expense account for the reasons that we just talked about: timeliness, control, and obviously control is a touchy subject potentially with Santa. But anyway,
Is it? I mean, I
Oh,
didn't get that impression.
well, I don't know her.
It could be. It could.
It could
be.
be, yeah.
Does that in effect bypass the statute though?
Yeah, that looks shady, doesn't it?
Well, no, I mean, the fund exists, and in order to touch the existing capital in there, the 12K, we would still use the exact same process of approaching Parks and Rec for approval of a project or an invoice or whatever. I don't know, just a thought.
No, I like that thought because it seems like the monies from the hayfield ought to be going at least more towards open space than just pure Parks and Rec. But I don't know. Does anybody know if Parks and Rec has any account that they can tap into?
They have like $3,000 that just seems to get carried forward for 1,000 years. I don't know,
How about
you know
this?
where they go, Bob? They go to CPA. I just had 2 invoices on that skating rink.
Okay, how about this scenario, which is a takeoff of what Mark had said, that both Parks and Rec and open space should have some sort of access to funds that get replenished. How about if we split the hay money in some fashion so that a portion of it goes to Parks and Rec, but a portion of it goes to us. But we have direct control over that. And even in bad times like this year, I don't know what the money's coming in from Lance will be this year, but it'll probably be at least in the $3,000 range, if not more. So each of us would get approximately $1,500 to $2,000, $2,500 a year.
Yeah, I could see that flying.
Well, it would be much more palatable to Sanda, probably.
Yeah.
So
does anybody have any feeling for what Sanda's reaction to this? Has Sanda used any of that money?
Not that I know of. Of course, we didn't realize, oh, all of a sudden $12,000 sounds more important than 3 or 4 in the past, when they combined them.
well, they've used that money,
How do we know that?
the skating rink money, right?
That was CPA.
Oh, it was.
Yeah. That was allocated for 2 years ago, and they're finally getting the pieces now in dribs and drabs. We've had 2 big invoices, and I told her, and we had a thing about tax.
All right, so how about, here's what's.
I still think you should start it as a conversation, not a letter.
Yeah.
What if?
Yes.
What about?
So here's my path on that. I think as a starting point, I'm just going to talk to Jassy to get a little bit of history on the rationale of why Parks has
Why
got.
do they have anything to do with it?
I thought that was part of the statute, was it had to go to Parks and Rec.
Yeah, it is.
Well,
So,
Fine.
that's law, Bob. That's the way the law is written right now.
Parks.
That's a
and
state
Rec.
statute.
Yeah, but why?
I don't know.
Why was Parks and Rec and not the Open Space Committee given that?
Don't know. I think-
Maybe we need
Okay.
to do some research.
I believe that's a state statute, not a town statute, is what I'm saying.
Why do you believe that?
Because I'm going from memory of what I read when I read it months ago.
Yeah, I'm just looking. It is. I'm just looking it up right now.
Oh,
And if that's the case, Bob,
don't mess with it.
well, no, I mean, if the statute says it has to go to Parks and Rec and then we immediately transfer.
I agree that's what the statute says, but that's just because the way that was written.
I think
What I'm saying, Bob, is you could conceivably put all that money into Parks and Rec and then immediately transfer it to wherever on a town basis, and you're in effect bypassing the
Statute.
the terms of the statute or the intent of the statute. In other words, I don't know that it would be legal.
I'm waiting for Mark to read a few paragraphs.
Yeah.
here it is.
Mhm.
Let's see. Ooh.
Oh, what?
Is that a good ooh or a bad ooh?
That's a bad ooh.
Okay. Give it to us straight. Yeah, you see, you read it.
Well, that's
Something about there's no whining in baseball.
I'm just going to read it.
That's a good
Not-
analogy, Steph.
Notwithstanding any other general or special law to the contrary, the town of Hubbardston may establish and maintain a special account known as the Fund for Hubbardston Preservation. The town shall keep the fund separate and apart from all other monies of the town, and shall deposit in the account all monies received from fees collected from private functions for use of town-owned land designated as open space, recreation land, or conservation land, or from fees collected such as sale of timber, blah, blah.
And
Expenditures from the fund may be made to acquire additional open space with the approval of the select board and town meeting. to maintain or improve existing recreation and open space lands, and to preserve town-owned historical sites and buildings.
It sounds a lot like CPA there, doesn't it?
Expenditures from the fund shall be authorized by the select board based on recommendations of the Parks and Recreation Committee. And the rest isn't pertinent.
So here's an idea. Why doesn't somebody from here be on the Parks and Rec? They're probably looking for somebody. I'm halfway serious. And by the way, that gets interest quarterly. Remember, I said, wait a minute, all of a sudden $200. And so it gets interest because it's in a trust account and it's segregated. So our hands are kind of tied there, I believe. And to
Well,
try to make,
The money's supposed to be, sounds like the money's supposed to be spent on open space, but it has to be passed through Parks and Rec and,
No, the purposes are open space or
Yeah,
recreation
recreation.
or historical buildings.
oh, okay, that's why Susan said, sounds like CPC.
well, because it hits those through. Maybe that was a
Yeah.
precursor to passing the CPA. I don't
Has it,
know. That doesn't
Do we-
mean-
do we know if it has been spent on things other than open space?
We don't. I don't think Sando.
What,
No.
what were the words on who has the authority to control it?
Parks and Rec.
Select board with the recommendation from the Parks and Rec.
And I think at the time that that was written, the people that were on open space were also on Parks and Rec. It was almost like all the people on open space were also several people on Parks and Rec. So maybe they had written that out, and we could ask Jassy that, because I'm pretty sure she was on both at the time. That it sounded like a great idea, but when they're two, right now, we don't really know anybody on Parks and Rec. We don't have great
What was, we do,
communications.
are there any, have you got any insight on what the words for the old? There was Fund for Hubbardston Preservation, and then there was a Hubbardston Preservation Fund. And I don't,
And they didn't figure it out until about 3 or 4 months ago.
I used to know the rationale behind that, but I don't
Yeah,
remember it. At this point, they've been combined.
It's
yeah.
now called the
that's all.
Hubbardston Preservation Trust.
Trust.
So what do we do here, folks?
Nothing.
I think you have a conversation with Ryan to determine if there's some vehicle that could be used to accomplish what we want to do and start from there. And I mean, he's bound by the same statute, so we're all in the same boat.
Does that statute mark, or does that, what the definition of that Fund for Hubbardston Preservation, does that require that all monies, specifically from the hayfields or potentially
Forest.
forest harvest, go to that account, or could they go to some other account?
No,
No, it says pretty explicitly that it's got to be kept separate from the other money, any other monies of the town. So as Rick suggested, I don't think we can set up a direct transfer to another account.
right, well, then-
I just emailed the statute around to everybody.
Okay,
And by the way, before CPA meeting is coming up, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk about before it gets too much later. And we want to keep open, healthy relationships there because it's kind of all inextricably linked. Because Sand, of course, is chair of that, and we're looking for 75K for Fieldstone Farm. So I don't know, I would say let sleeping dogs lie. It's working for us. We've been able to pay our bills. I understand why you want to do that, Bob, but I'm not sure it's worth the
Well,
confusion.
it wasn't just me, it was us. I mean, we were talking about what
Yeah, no, I mean, it would be nice to have some independence, but we're working with
the,
a town.
should I go down a path, first talking to Ryan and then secondly to Sanda, looking to replenish the rider account?
Well, that's our problem, isn't it?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. I mean, if, and, you know, to the extent that we might want to have these conversations going forward, if we were trying to transfer money under our control, I would rather see it in the OSC expense account than the rider account,
Yeah, good point.
so that it's not constrained for use only at Mount Jeff.
It could be
Yeah,
used for
that's
Malone or
right.
Geordie Lane or any other project we had in mind.
What time is it? 8:30.
You know, we've talked in the past about trying to get an operating budget
Yeah,
for the
that's,
OSC.
that's where my head was just going, Mark.
Which would cover, I mean, realistically, we're not going to get much money that way. It would just be for incidental type stuff, but it would give us a little bit of a ongoing revenue stream for small, quick expenses.
Well, you know, like the
We
signs you
could-
did and the materials for the trail and stuff like that.
So we could request from the town on an expense account, which we've been asked to do by the town, I believe.
And then we've
So
never
we could
done it.
potentially put in like $1,000 or $1,500 in for a request for our expense account, right? Is that what I hear?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised if we got.
I think it's 500.
Yeah, I was going to say that was the number I kind of had in mind. I would be surprised if we could get more than $500 or $1,000 at most.
Yeah, but
We talked
that's,
about
that would cover some posts and annually,
Yeah.
right?
Well, no, it has to be, you use that.
Does
yearly.
it have to be spent every year? Can it?
Oh,
Oh, no.
Typically, yes.
Oh, okay.
well, it hasn't been. It's been 477 for like 3
No,
years.
no, that's a different account, Susan.
Oh, now we're gonna start another
We're
account?
talking.
No, that's the same one we're talking about.
No, we're talking
Oh, it
about
is?
open space, expense, or donations. It's called /both.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Sorry.
Good job, Susan.
Well, it just makes sense.
All right.
Um, So should we let,
Think about it. and come
Bob, are
up
you
with-
frustrated over this? Sorry.
Oh, no. I'm just trying to, I'm not frustrated. Just trying to figure out how to go forward. It would be nice to have access. So here's how I summarize how we as a committee should go forward relative to things like what we have just done. We can go forward and tentatively in the future with things like this, with the intent of using money from the funds for Hubbardson Preservation, which gets significant contributions to it. How do we can we get prior approval? We started down this path probably 20 minutes ago.
I would say if we had a firm quote, we would be able to get prior approval.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. If we get
But
a
if there was a change in the amount for whatever reason, added work or whatever, we would have to go back and get approval for that too, I assume, because it requires a vote.
Okay. And for the most part, just like in Robert Hype's thing, he could have given us a firm quote because he's just working essentially on not even material. He's just working on time.
Yeah.
A lot of things are time and material, but in this case, he's just working on time. And so he could have given us a firm quote. Okay, I'll do 1 day's worth of forest mulcher work, and it'll cost you this amount of money.
Yeah, I mean, you can when you're talking to a vendor about providing a service or a material, you can say that
We need a firm quote.
It's a firm quote. You don't
Yeah.
get to change this.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And if they're used to working with towns, the state, federal government, that's not going to be a surprise to them.
No, and it wasn't to Robert. He had this automated thing, so I kept getting a couple of reminders to pay the invoice. But when I talked to him, he said, I know the towns take money, so don't pay any attention to that. So he was fine with what we were doing. All right.
The other, let me throw one other thing out here, which just came up today in my conversations with Ryan. And that was that, I've been concerned that in this situation where we're pursuing a reimbursement grant, and we have to pay for the stuff up front and then
Yep.
get reimbursed later. I was worried that we needed to have money under our control to be able to cover that in order to apply for the grant. Today, Ryan told us that, and this is for the recreational trail grant for the signage, which is $8,000. And I posed the question directly to him: if we don't have that money in the Hubbardston Preservation Fund, do you have accounts available to you that you can use for something like this, where you're going to get reimbursed 4 or 5 months down the line? And he said yes.
Yep, I saw that. Yep,
He's,
up to $10,000 or something, right?
well, no, he didn't put a number on it.
I saw one number he put in there.
That was something different.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, having that pot of money as leverage for grants is not quite as essential as I had been afraid it might be. If we're looking at a reimbursement site.
Oh, okay.
Scenario.
You're getting back to the Ryder account, and we wanted to maintain, $4,000 or $5,000 in there. Okay, yeah, that went back to a previous conversation we had at the last meeting. Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, for what that's worth.
All right. So I think we're done. Just stop what I'm doing on that particular letter. We'll go down the path of trying to get quotes that we can submit ahead of time to get approval ahead of time if we want to use the funds from Hubbardston Preservation, and that's probably the best path to go down. And leave it at that. That sound good? That's all right.
Yeah, let's just put it on our calendar for and broach the subject with Ryan about whether he might be receptive to a budget item for open space.
Okay.
For incidentals, and that'll come up next fall when he asks department heads and committee chairmen for their budgets.
Okay. So an expense line item for open space.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I'm hearing. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I don't, wherever I had that agenda stuff. Anything else under?
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Did you
Yeah.
just
All
read?
right, Susan.
Well, January 15 is coming up, and that's when the CPA is supposed to meet. And Steffi, we're going ahead and with a $75,000 request for the East Quabbin Land Trust for the Fieldstone Farms. Everybody's on board with that. Everybody understands that. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, as part of preparation, we're supposed to get support from the various boards, and death by PowerPoint. Rick and I have discussed a 10 to 12 slide presentation that would be, you can share, just have it roll and people are watching it, like with the select board, with Parks and Rec, whomever. I have the time to do it. If somebody else wants to help out, that'd be great. But I would love input on what should be in those 10 to 12 succinct, relevant, positive slides. In other words, an example like the geographical connectivity of this particular parcel. Remember how we've talked about, and there's a lot of information in Cynthia's request. The migration paths, the hiking trails, the proximity to Mount Wachusett, Mid-State Trail, Audubon, that could be a slide. And then money, and I hope I have this right, state reimbursement on state-owned land on the 2019 report, page 21, it's $632, almost $633,000. Is that correct? Is that what it says? Right, folks? Does that number sound right?
What are we talking about?
We're talking about state reimbursement on state-owned land. That's in every town report, because Jesse mentioned
In
this.
lieu of taxes?
Yes,
Yeah, so I mean, as I understand it, that's just goes into the kitty then, right? And that's unrestricted funds, and that certainly helps the town. I'm trying to look for the positives of the open
That doesn't-
space.
That
That doesn't
wouldn't,
sound right?
that wouldn't, well, I mean, yeah, maybe it's right, but at any rate, what relation would it have to Fieldstone Farm?
Well, part of that,
That's for properties that are owned by the state.
well, part of that will be though, part of that parcel, isn't that correct?
Okay, right, it would apply to the western parcel.
Right, so, and that's just it.
Which
When
is
you're
what, 400?
presenting this idea, you want to be sure that it's full disclosure. You have to,
What
you
is,
know.
which is what, 450K? What's
693 or something like that.
Six,
no, though, but the portion of it that could be eligible for state refunding or repayment on a yearly basis, or however that is, like a tax credit or whatever it's called,
right.
is what's the what's Sean's group chipping in? 450?
I think it's closer to 250 on the,
Is it
On
250?
I haven't looked at it since.
We're talking two different things here.
Yeah, okay.
We're
But-
talking about annually, the state reimburses the town for use for the land that they control. It's money that comes into the town.
Yeah,
That's different than DCR purchasing the property. That's,
I mean, it would be based, I'm sure there's some kind of formula based on acreage that says, we're gonna give you X number of dollars per acre that we own.
that's where I was going, Mark. That's the number that the grand total that they contribute to the town, Susan, the 633K. Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree. I don't have those numbers in front of me.
What's
But the
acreage?
number that you want is the number per acre.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
so
But,
if they contributed that and it's 5,000 or 10,000 acres or whatever it is, it's a pretty good amount of acreage associated with that. How
right.
much is it per acre that they comes back into the town via that avenue?
yeah, we can.
That's
find
what
out.
you'd want to put in there.
Right,
Right, but as a concept, I mean, when you look at that number, that's significant, I would think, in a town budget.
but what Bob is saying.
Oh, I know, but how does that translate to what Fieldstone will
Right.
add?
Well, right, that would
do
be an additional amount then,
Yeah,
correct?
but that's
So now
that's
it's
the
forever.
number. That's the number you need, not what we're getting now.
I
How much-
know, but I'm saying, I didn't know what.
Oh, I had heard of that before. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Divide the 633
Well,
by the
so-
number of acres. that
So you make a slide on the financial positives of that.
Yeah,
Well, yes, and that would be one of them, as well as, and a lot of people don't want to hear it, but that the open space essentially has a financial plus as it relates to, I don't know, houses and.
Cost of community services is the buzzword.
Well, and here's another thing that might go
What's the
with
buzzword,
that.
Mac?
What?
Cost of community services.
Right.
Yeah,
And the point is too, we, meaning open space, have not, Mount Jeff was 2002, Malone was 2008. That was 13 years ago. We have not made any land acquisitions in over a decade. It's about time. Now, how do you say that nicely? Because, well, but you want to I like the product to sell itself. I don't like to have to talk someone into something. Say, oh, look at how much money the town is currently bringing in.
So
Who is this presentation going to, Susan?
Any board that we want to go to, because we're supposed to garner support, because on the warrant it says, blah, 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 supported by the select board or the open space, or that's what I'm looking for.
Initially, what she wants to do.
Thank you. Right, go ahead.
Well, initially, what you want to do is to provide a short, brief presentation highlighting the benefits of the acquisition to the CPC. So when they meet on January 15th, they understand what it's about and why it's important, and give them some reason to vote for it, to move it on, even though they're required to anyway. And then past that, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Susan and Steph, but the CPC is supposed to solicit input from the other boards on something like this. And that presentation, if you want to call it that, could be used for that purpose to inform, educate the other members of the community on the benefits of it. So that's what's behind what Susan's trying to put together.
Which is in a couple of weeks, they could be the guinea pigs. Sort of,
So the CPC is comprised of all these boards that we're trying to get on board.
Right.
The whole idea. So there's a representative from every board on the
Right.
CPC, supposedly.
Yes,
So we've
because
got everybody on board with it. They bring it back to their committees and their boards, and then when it comes to the town and it's put forth for everyone to vote, then some people, get up and speak about it. Maybe there might be somebody from each board that would get up and promote it.
at that point, I would hope it would be out there and set up like what Sanda did. This doesn't affect your taxes. It's already in there. And we haven't acquired land in over a decade. And that's
But as Stephanie said, you've got a member of each of these committees.
on CPC.
Yes.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
So if they go back to their committee and they maybe kind of vaguely remember what it was about from the CPC meeting, if they were even paying attention, you want to be the one that provides the
Clarity.
the words. And if you can hand them a slide, even if it's printed out slides that they can share with their committee when they go back, it's us doing the sales job and not the
Yeah,
person on the CPC committee.
Because
So-
normally you just have an application that is in your hand that you could show your own committee. Like,
Right,
Susan and I would get an application from someone and we could show it to the open space committee. This is what their application looked like.
right.
But
So
something like
maybe
this-
the planning board person on the committee goes back to the planning board and says, well, we voted that to push this forward. And somebody says to them, well, what is it for? And they're gonna, try to remember what they heard at the CPC meeting
Yeah,
3 months before. And we want to be the ones to be
Have the answers.
to be providing that information, not relying on a particular person to remember what was said and vaguely try to convey what the benefits would be.
So Todd,
Susan, is the meeting on the 15th
well,
an
that's what
introduction of the
said.
issue, or do you actually vote on at that point?
It's introduced at that point. And then, as I recall from what happened last year, then we met the next month, and then it started to be Zoom things from there on.
But do they vote on it? So you introduce
I
it.
don't think, Steph, do you remember?
yeah, no, I don't think, it didn't, no, applications have to be in by, I think, the January, and then they have to be voted on maybe by March, because Ryan needs to have them and ready to put them on
For the
the,
warrant, right. Well, technically, if you read the rules, when the application is put in, it was supposed to be dispensed to everyone. And I don't know where those hard copies are. So I'm going to check with Town Hall and I'll check with Cynthia, because we need to get them out to people so they can read it. Because to read through online here would be ridiculous. I'll go around and get the hard copies to people.
What she's saying was the I'm sorry to have to translate, Susan, but
Go ahead, that's all
Let
right.
somebody speak.
I'm from Mars. Oh,
Okay.
come on.
I understood her.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie.
so it was
Rick, you might want
required,
to get ready to duck.
Cynthia was required to submit 8, 9, 10 copies,
10.
10 copies of the application to be distributed to members of the CPC committee. She submitted those to town hall for Sandra to pick up 2 months ago at least. And to date, none of the CPC members have received their copy.
That's why I will.
And here we are a week and a half before the meeting.
Right, I will offer to get them out to the people if I hand deliver them to their doors. Fine.
Could you deliver mine?
Oh, yes.
We'll send some ponies down to pick
Pony,
up.
Pony Express, yes.
You
You want this to fly. Any
know,
idea?
and I don't know how much detail you want to get into this, but I love the idea of what you're talking about, and I will certainly contribute to that. But maybe even some of Ralph's Vegas. I don't know how much, protecting our environment contributes to the value of what you're saying. I mean, to
Well,
the
a whole
people here it
slide
does, but
on COVID and the fact that people are taking more advantage of open space.
Mhm.
all of those
I have a
things, yeah.
list, but I want to see if you guys come up with some of the same ideas and then.
But
we'll
why
all
don't you,
decide
I think what would help, Susan, if you get just a sort of a draft and send that around in any kind of crude fashion, then we can add our own thoughts to it.
Oh, I was thinking maybe you could initiate your own and see if we got the same, but sure. By the end of the week, I'll send out my list if you guys don't send me ideas. How about that? You know
All
where
right.
to find me. Right.
Yeah, and a lot of the ideas are right on that pamphlet.
Right, and Cynthia's application, which I don't have a final copy. I have the rough draft. She even tweaked it a little more, and it was very good and very thorough and very relevant. I mean, do we want to try to get this land, folks?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You already made
I
that
don't want to
decision.
be barking up the wrong tree, so to speak. So,
Yep.
okay.
All right.
So I'll look for ideas by the end of the week. Okie doke.
All right.
All right.
Anything else on the new business? Oh, quite a meeting, folks, quite a meeting. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
When's our next meeting first?
26.
All right,
Are we doing the last Tuesday?
Yep, that sounds good.
January 26th.
January 26th. I'll write
Thank you,
that down.
Susan.
Yeah.
All right, I move to adjourn.
I hear a second.
Okie doke. Second.